And today I am very happy to have Dr. Patricia Landaverde. Hello, Patricia.
Hello, hola a todos. Eu estou muito feliz por ter sido convidada, mas eu peço desculpas porque meu português não é bom.
It's very nice from you, Pati, to say it in Portuguese. I'm pretty sure that people will be very happy to hear it. Patricia, she's a biologist. She made her biology course on the University of the San Carlos de Guatemala. After she finished her biology course, she went to Mexico, where she studied ecology in the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico. And more recently, she completed her PhD in general zoology in the Martin Luther University in Germany. Patricia is very eager to study pollination ecology, especially on the neotropical region. And her focus is especially on understanding the effects of land use at different levels of biodiversity on populations of native bees. Patricia, I recently read one of your manuscripts, which was very interesting, and I want to invite you to talk about this today.
Yeah.
The title of your paper is Sweat Bees on Hot Chilies, Provision of Pollination Service by Native Bees in Traditional Slash and Burn Agriculture in the Yucatan Peninsula of Tropical Mexico. Patricia, there is a worldwide concern regarding the effect of deforestation and landscape modification on pollination systems. Studies point out that anthropic modification on natural landscape has led to changes in several aspects related to diversity of pollinators. What is the reason why deforestation is linked to reduction of pollination diversity?
Well, this is very simple. You know, deforestation means habitat loss. And habitat loss is one of the first and most important threats to biodiversity. When we are destroying the forest, we are destroying the house, the area for nesting of many insects, and also the food source. And you know, I think there's no being in this planet that could survive without food. So obviously, all these insects, and particularly bees, could not survive when we are destroying the areas for nesting and the areas for food.
Yeah, but it seems like the most of the study we have on this topic are performed in the temperate zones. This seems to be less known in the tropical sites, including the neotropical region, where is the focus of your studies. In your study, you seem to present very interesting evidences to the neotropical region while you study pollination system in a slash and burn agriculture in Mexico. My first question, or the second question, what explains slash and burn agriculture? What is that?
Yeah, you know, I'm very happy that you asked that because slash and burn is a very conflicted subject. And many people is very angry because actually now you could see in Brazil and in Mesoamerica there's a lot of fire that is caused because many people practice slash and burn without a control burn in a massive area. And this is destroying, it's the same that deforestation is destroying the natural areas and it's not allowing biodiversity to be there. So a slash and burn is not beneficial when it's practiced in a big form, in a massive area without any control. But in Yucatan exists some traditional knowledge that make people to practice a slash and burn in a local area in small and controlled pieces of earth, and this is very beneficial for the soil there.
Yeah, I'm going to share here quickly. Maybe you can explain this system. Can you see it?
Yes, I could see it.
Yeah, can you explain this system?
Yeah, so first I want to say MILPA is a very complex concept, and it's a kind of a slash and burn agriculture, but it's a very complex concept because means it's an area in which you have different crops, principally three principal crops, that is pumpkin, beans, and maize. But it's also this spatial distribution in time that you could see here, in which in the beginning people has what is a mature forest. People has this forest, the mature forest, and then they begin to cut everything, not everything, they decide, since the beginning, the MILPA, they decide which area they have to cut because of different knowledge that they already have. They cut apart, they slash and burn, and then after they slash and burn, normally in Yucatan, the soil is very karstic and the area of the ground that is good for cultivation is very small. So all this burn, all this product from the slash and burn is giving some nutrients and is allowing that they could put some crops there. Normally, because of the characteristic of the soil, they only could have the crops for 2 or 3 years, and after that, they allow the land to fallow. They allow that there is coming different successional steps of regeneration of the forest until it's coming again to a kind of mature forest. So this is the nice concept of what is MILPA, because it's spatially and temporally something very complex, in which in this image, I like it a lot. You could see how the pumpkin is mixed with the beans and the maize, and it's so interesting how they get this knowledge, because beans, for example, are capturing nitrogen that is introducing the nitrogen then in the soil. And the calabaza, the pumpkins also have big leaves that are providing a lot of nutrients to the soil. And the maize is more something cultural, because I don't know if you hear that we are men and women for maize. So maize is something, is part of the identity. So these are called the three sisters. They are always together. Sometimes they also use chili, but all these crops are providing nutrients for the soil, and they are very important in this concept that is MILPA.
Okay, in your study, you want to understand how this traditional system affect pollinator community pollinator community in terms of species richness and diversity. And additionally, you will study the effect of local landscape on traits resulting from pollination, such as the number of seeds and fruit weight, which in your study we call it PSP.
Yeah. So what I was choosing for that was the seed set from Chile. So the number of seeds that were in Chile and the weight of the fruit. So this was for all the crops in all the areas. And then I was having 3 different treatments. The first treatment was a hand pollination treatment, in which I was making the pollination by hand for each of the flowers. So I want to get the most possible pollination that the plant could give. The second treatment was open pollination, in which the flowers were allowed open. So all insects, even that in Yucatan was 99.9% bees, were coming making pollination. So I could get the amount of pollination provided by insect. And the last treatment was an exclusion experiment, in which the flower was always let in a bag. So I could get the amount of self-pollination. Then I divide the amount of open pollination by the amount of the maximum possible, and I get a proportion of the efficiency of the insects in providing the service pollination. So this is the PSP, is the pollination service provision, and is reflecting this proportion of the efficiency of bees, the only value of service pollination that bees are providing. And it's going from 0 to 1, sorry.
No. And why did you choose Habanero Chili to study?
Yeah, it's also an interesting question. I choose Habanero Chili because in Yucatan Peninsula, there is like 2 cash crops that are the most important. Habanero Chili is the first one. And the second is citrus, all the orange, all the kind of citrus that people could take. But habanero was perfect for the pollination experiment because of the characteristics of the plant. And also it's very related with the culture, because the Mayans were always using chili for drinks in some religious traditions. And it's one of the most important cash crops. I think this is the principal reason. I want to assess in my research the paradox of this high production that is necessary for a growing human population, and how to maintain this high production and conserving biodiversity. And I was thinking this habanero was the perfect system for that.
Okay, and where did you develop this study, Patricia?
In Yucatan Peninsula, that is in the north of Mexico. That is an area that, as I was mentioning before, is very karstic. The soil is not so rich, and therefore they really need something that is making the soil to get rich. And what's interesting, for that they have this traditional milpa agriculture. So for that
Here,
I was choosing.
so here is like you can see the figure,
Yes,
the map.
yes, uh-huh.
So all the numbers here is these all the sites where you have collected data
Yeah.
on the community of bees, and also you develop your pollination experiment.
Yeah, the all the sites in all the sites, the community composition of bees were collected. So we sample bees, but the ones that are in red, I don't know if you could see them here in
What?
the center, especially, and some one out. All the ones in red is where the pollination experiments were done.
Ah, okay.
Mhm.
And how did you collect this information regarding the pollination community? Which method did you use it?
For the insects, we use pan traps that we put at the same height of the flowers of Habanero Chili. So we were putting a kind of a metal construction there, 50 centimeters high, that is the same size as the flower, and we use nets also.
Hmm. Patricia, you mentioned that you have focused your sampling on slash and burn sites, but it's very likely that the surrounding of this area differs, no, in your
Mhm.
student site. How do you did what do you make to calculate the anthropic effect on your system?
Yeah, this was also a lot of work, I should tell you, because normally what you do is that you characterize the different types of land use that exist in the area. For that, in Europe, I don't know how it's in Brazil, exists normally there's already shapes of the different type of land use that exist, but in Mexico that was not existing. So we have to get the satellite imaginary from these satellites out, and with high resolution, and we have to analyze cell by cell to determine what was inside and get the percentage of the different categories of land use. I was making three categories. That was the first, the forest, mature forest. The second was crops, all the areas with crops. And the third was a very complex mix of fallow areas that, as I mentioned before, is coming from milpa, garden areas, the Mayan garden areas, that also is a mix of milpa, these three sisters combine the crops,
Mhm.
and pasture, that is only like areas with grass, normally also very heterogeneous. So these were my three landscape categories, and then I was making analysis with generalized linear model to know if there were some correlation between some of these three categories of land use type and values of biodiversity and pollination service provision, to give an idea if there could be some effect of the landscape.
All right. And
Mhm.
it seems that you have collected loads of different bees during your experiment, right?
Yeah.
How many bees did you sample?
Well, the species were 91 morpho species. And here we have to make again emphasis that there is a lot of studies in Europe about this species, but in Latin America there is not really so much. And for example, this is the one that were the most abundant, Lasioglossum dialectus, that in the moment in which I was doing the analysis were not very famous. Were not described. And now I'm working in the description of this bee.
It seems to be
So
very small species.
yeah, it's very small. Because of the abundance in Yucatan, we are going to call it Lasioglossum delictus yucatanensis.
Hmm.
And there were other three species that were more abundant of 5%. There were the three from the Apidae. This is another family of bees. And the Apidae are the family of the Apis mellifera, and they are Melissoda stepaneca, there is solitary bee, Centris, also is a morphic species, that is also a solitary bee, and one social, that is Trigona fulviventris, that is normally found in Brazil. I've seen also in many different kind of crops.
Uh-huh. And it seems that the area that where you have studied still has a lot of forest cover despite other regions of the neotropical region.
Mhm.
It might be a kind of reflex of this MILPA system in the Yucatan Peninsula.
Yeah. Yeah.
How the structure of the landscape affect the number of species and abundance in your system, in the MILPA system? For example, do forest sites more diverse than others?
Yeah, of course. We find this is something that is very repetitive. We always find support in many studies. Normally, when in areas where there is forest, we always find more diversity of bees. This is principally very strong in the tropics, while in temperate areas it's not always very strong, because here they already lost a lot of diversity in Europe. So they actually have the strongest species surviving. Yeah. Here in this graph you could see it very, very clear how with the increase of areas of forest is also increasing the diversity of bees, showing or supporting the idea of what other people have already found, that forest is very important to maintain diversity of bees.
Uh-huh. That's interesting. And across all sites, what you have found in your pollination experiments?
Yeah, this was a little contradictory because we find actually that richness doesn't have any effect on the service of pollination to Habanero Chili, while the abundance of bees was having a very strong effect. Yeah, you could see it there.
The table one, right?
No, the graph size is the better.
Ah, okay. Here we
Yeah,
go.
yeah. So you could see here how. Well, here I only show abundance because richness was not having any effect. So was a line in the middle. We saw anything with the points around. So this is a little contradictory because forest is very important for the diversity of bees, but the diversity of bees is not important for the provision of pollination. It's more the abundance of bees for the.
Would it be related? Would it be related maybe to the biology or natural history of this pollinator, like
Yeah, yeah,
Plasmodium?
Yeah, exactly. As I think I mentioned since the beginning, there are bees that the bees could have different habitats, and there are bees that are very robust, like bumblebees and swap bees. And Alictidia laceolostum dialectus is a swap bees that nest on the ground. So in Milpa, these heterogeneous areas, they could find areas for nesting. And this generally, so these bee could find different kind of flower source. And this is making the bee resistant and is allowing the population to be abundant. So yes, of course, it's something related with the system.
Yeah, and you have shown, Pat, in your study that the path analysis it's something like very interesting because you are able to disentangle the effect of each variable on the reproductive system of the Chile habanero. Can you maybe explain us this system that I'm plotting here?
Yeah. So the big advantage of using structural equation modeling, the path analysis, is that it's allowing to put different categories with generalized linear model. That is like a kind of correlation analysis. You only could compare two. While here you could have different levels. In this case, I was using the first level that was environment and landscape. Then the second that is bee composition, and then the third that is the service of pollination. And then you could, as you say, disentangle if the effect of the landscape, for example, is direct on the service of pollination or indirect, and how is the composition of bees acting in the middle? Is favoring that, or is not good, or what? So this is the big advantage of this analysis, that you could separate everything and go and check for direct and indirect effects.
And it seems
So
that yeah, it seems that correct me, but it seems that is the abundance of these species that are leading to the higher production of this plant that you worked, right?
yeah, so in the beginning, I was making the analysis only with abundance. I was using richness and abundance of bees was significant. However, as we find that Lasioglossum dialectus was very abundant, was almost the 22%, we decided to let only the abundance of Lasioglossum. And here is very interesting because if you see here, for example, with the landscape, this dotted line means that there is no significant effect. So you could see there is no significant effect of any variable of the landscape in the service of pollination. However, this complex matrix, the FGP that is coming from MILPA and the forest, they are significant over only the abundance of bees, in this case Lactoglossum, while it doesn't have any effect in the richness. At the end, the model is choosing the most parsimonious model, and I was choosing only this complex matrix, the FGP, that was very strong, having a very strong positive effect on the abundance of bees, and the presence of Lactoglossum delictus was having a strong effect on the service of pollination. So
it's really interesting, this system.
Yeah.
So you have studied sites with different anthropic levels, and is your finding similar to other studies? Do the composition of bee species and abundance is affected by forest composition on the MILPA system?
Yeah, this is the first study in which the MILPA agroecosystem is a study to see how it's affecting insects. There are already some studies analyzing how MILPA agroecosystem is affecting mammals, for example, small mammals, and diversity of plants. But until now, there were any really making emphasis in insect and especially in bees, and more especially in how it's affecting the production of some crop. So I could not really compare with something before because this is the first study doing that. But I could talk about these other studies with mammals in which they also find that MILPA was helping to increase the diversity of mammals and plants.
And what is the effect of the traditional MILPA agriculture on pollination system of Habanero?
Yeah, in this case was positive because the MILPA agroecosystem was allowing this heterogeneity of the landscape that allow the increase of the population of Lactoglossum that was also good for the Habanero chili. However, this could not be always the same for other species.
Yeah, it seems like I went deep reading more about the habanero in Mexico, and this is like it's a crash crop, so it's more related to a familiar way of production plants or way of having like an extra income, right? And it seems like this system would not be or would not work for more monocultural system or more like non-traditional system as the Mayan they did in the past.
Yeah.
So could we expect that these results can be similar to other plant species?
Yeah, here is a lot of things to discuss because monoculture, of course, could have some benefit from some kind of heterogeneity around some. For example, many people is investigating the effect of floral strips around crops. So could be something similar to what MILPA is. However, this depends a lot of the crop and the moment in which they give the flowering. In the case of Mesoamerica, for example, in which this exists, even for other crops like, for example, pumpkin, I think could not be so efficient. I think we should be cautious because, for example, pumpkin has very specific pollinator as Peponapis limitaris, that is a bee from the Apidae family, is a relative of the Apis mellifera. In Mexico and in other parts of North America, in Guatemala is Partamona bilineata, a small, very nice bee. They are very sensitive to the loss of habitat, and could be that probably MILPA is not beneficial for them because they really need a tree for nesting. And maybe in MILPA they could not find that. So we should be very cautious because other crops probably will not work so well. They will need, because they need some stingless bees that are more sensitive, they will need another kind of characteristics. They will need more forest. So it's something, as I told you, this is the first study and was positive, but we have to see with more sensitive bees that are pollinated other kind of crops or even natural plants.
You have shared with me this figure I'm plotting here. Would you like to mention something about this? What is? I heard you are studying also coffee. Is it what you want to tell us, please?
Well, coffee is not a traditional crop. In this graph, I like it a lot because I think that MILPA is also showing how the level of knowledge that the Mayan were having about nature and the fun to develop some agriculture technology that is also sustainable, not only biologically, but also socially. And as you can see here, Mesoamerica is also a hotspot of many crops that are worldwide used. I think everybody's always having avocado, pumpkin, chili, beans in the table everywhere in the world. In all parts of Europe, doesn't matter how European they are always using this different cultivation, cotton, for example. So the origin of these crops is Mesoamerica and it's coming from the Mayans. So it's showing how they developed. They really were good with agriculture, with selection of different crops, and they developed this that we actually use now, and how they could do it in a sustainable form. So yeah, it's very interesting, the area in particular, but it's Mesoamerica, to make so many studies about evolution and ecology.
Patricia, I would like to thank you so much for having being here with us, spending your precious time. It was very interesting. Your paper is really interesting, and I want to finish. I want to finish this this chat with the last question. What's your final message regarding MILPA system versus other crop system and conservation of pollinators?
As I mentioned in the beginning, I think we should be very careful when talking about something that is included in slash and burn, because in many areas of Mesoamerica and Brazil, unfortunately, we don't have a value what is the culture, what is the indigenous group having, and we are lost in that. So many people maybe hear in some moment that they make some slash and burn and they think they could do it, and what they are doing is only burning everything, making big fire. And it's not like that. We have to be careful and take value of the traditional knowledge and how they practice that, because MILPA could be beneficial, all this complex concept of having these different crops together and slashing and burn, but if you know how to do it. I think MILPA is existing as MILPA in Mesoamerica, but I'm sure in Brazil is also existing something similar with the indigenous groups. And I think it could be very interesting to study, because as the
It's a
platform
good
of
idea. Bring someone to talk about Brazil on the slash and burn system.
Yeah, and the platform of biodiversity conservation and ecosystem service, the IPBES, has suggested that many of this traditional knowledge could be very beneficial for the production of crops and for the conservation of biodiversity. So I think that it's nice that you are bringing people to talk here, because maybe we could learn a lot and implement that in a nice form.
Thank you, Patricia, again. It was very nice to have you here today and presenting us your study, clarifying the slash and burn system of MILPA, traditional system in Mesoamerica. Thank you
Obrigada.
so much.